Hi, you guys. This is just a really brief video to talk a little bit about the coding exercise. Um, Coding can bring out a lot of frustration for people because it seems like there's so many different ways to do it, and how are you supposed to know if you're doing it right? So I want to take you through what I see as the most um, basic and straightforward way you could go about completing this assignment. And so I'm zeroing in on grounded theory coding because I think it's quite generalizable, and even though it is specific to grounded theory, um, it's very similar to what you would do in phenomenology, for instance, or heuristic inquiry. So let's just look at this. Really focused on page 345 in Hayes and Singh, there are three basic steps to grounded theory coding. The first of which is open coding, and that's when you take a really wide review of the data. You're reading it several times, um, close reading to see what large domains am I seeing, and you identify key phrases. So for me, what this looks like is reading the whole thing several times and then reading it line by line, and that's when I start to really, insert myself into the document. I use the Microsoft Word comment function, and I think that's what Steph did as well in her example. So we would do that, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. After we've done all of the open coding, we go to axial coding, and that's the process of refining those initial codes to try to see if there are relationships. And what that means is, can I put things into categories? So open coding is like everything's on the same level. In phenomenology, this would be known as horizontalization. Axial coding is the beginning of nesting things together. So hopefully what will happen is that you'll see a theme start to emerge, and you can start to, in a Word document, say, make a table with a column that has a theme at the top, and then you insert sort of your evidence for that theme, all your little open codes that are similar. And you might have, lots of those categories. You might have 3, you might have 7, you might have 35, and then you have a big job ahead. Because the next step is selective coding, where you're really looking at your axial codes and you're thinking, okay, is this the best way to organize these? Can I collapse these even further? And what are the relationship among these categories, these axial codes? And that's when you hopefully end up with a beautiful diagram of this axial code leads to this, which then leads to this, which goes, and maybe you have a circle or something. So you've seen that in research reports, I'm sure, where they have a graphic that explains the relationship among the categories that they found in their data. So for this assignment, I would say do the first two. We don't have really enough data to do selective coding, I would say. But you can do open and axial coding, and I'm going to take you through just really briefly Maureen's post, Small Things. So I've read this a few times already, so I'm ready to start my open coding, where I'm looking for key statements that I think really get at what's going on here. So the question that I'm trying to answer in grounded theory language is, how does Maureen replenish herself? So it's a process question. How is this thing happening, as opposed to a descriptive question? And the question, as Steph pointed out in her post, really helps to focus what you're doing in your coding. So for me, right off the bat, I think the title that she gave to her post is one of those significant statements. So I'm going to make a new comment, and I'm staying close to her language. So I'm going to actually use her language. That's Small Things. So that's an open code. Things that work for me are extremely small. I'm going to make another one there. And even in this 2-bit example, I'm already starting to see a theme emerge. So I'm going to call that extremely small things. So I've got small things and I've got extremely small things. And I'm looking ahead to axial coding thinking, maybe there will be a theme, an axial code that will be all about the little things that comprise her self-care, which would have self-care with a little s. Because look here, our next key phrase, I think, is self-care with capital letters. She's pointing out that there was this other thing, capital S, self-care, is what I'm going to call that code. Because she's pointing out that that was a different thing that didn't work. Seemed to be another thing I was doing wrong. That seems like a key phrase. Another thing I was doing wrong. So even in the first, what have I got, 1, 2, 3 lines of this post, I'm starting to construct a theory that Maureen has this idea of self-care with a capital S that is external and easy to fail at. And then there's this other axial code that I want to build that's about small things that she does that work for her to do this little s self-care. So I would continue to go through this document, and then down here in her numbered things, there are these actions. Go walk around Whole Foods, I would code that. Read romantic books that are not written well, I would code that. Follow blogs, I would code that. And those would probably all nest under an axial code of little s self-care activities. So what I hope you're seeing is that even as you're doing this open coding process, your mind is jumping ahead to axial coding, and that's totally okay. That's normal and good. But you want to go through the whole thing and do open codes, and then you take your open codes and you create, this is how I do it. You insert a table. So let's say, I think I'm going to do 3. Let's do that. So I have an experiment going that I think we have self-care. Oh, darn you, auto formatting. With a little s, and then we have it with a big S. And I'm going to bold these because I think those are my categories. And then under here, I'm going to put my open codes right from the text. So these are like my bits of evidence. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it down here. Things that work for me are extremely small. And then I would say maybe I go walk around Whole Foods. You see where I'm going with this. Self-care with a big S was different, right? Seemed another thing I could be doing wrong. So that's going to go over here. So I'm moving really quickly, but I'm starting to build these axial codes where things are nested within categories. And that's all you guys need to do for this example is read a document, see what's coming up, and try to put it into categories, or you can think of them as themes. And that's as far as we're going to go with it. People who are going to actually enact their study and do it, the next phase of creating the relationships among these categories, that gets really fun and interesting and messy and sometimes confusing, and I'll totally be around to help for that as well. But in terms of this assignment, let's just stick here looking for themes. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, I suggest doing grounded theory coding, open coding, axial coding, and really looking at this page 345 as a pretty streamlined process. And keep the questions coming. Good luck.